right, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Sandra Brighton-Gross-Bitter. I am the Director of Training with ILRU, and I am in my home office. I have dark brown hair, glasses, and I'm wearing a polka dot shirt today. Let's see. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm going to be working with you today from the ILRU side, and then we have our technical assistance contractors, Carrie England and Jeremy Morris, that will also be participating in today's call. At the bottom of your screen, you can enable captions, and on your video, I have pinned the ASL interpreter, and you can pin that as well, just so that video stays at the top of your screen. As we're going to go ahead and get started. We have a presentation to go through, and then we will pause for Q&A. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. And once again, I'm sorry if I missed this, but this is the SPIL Training and Technical Assistance monthly series. All right. Sorry about that, getting all my adjustments. And as I mentioned, we are going to be going through a couple of different sections of the SPIL. Our previous meetings that we've had this fall, we've been talking about some of the beginning sections, but now we're going to go into section 1.4, which is evaluation, 1.5, which is the financial plan, and then go into section 2, which includes services, outreach, and coordination of services. So you'll, or as I just mentioned, and here on the slide, you'll see these specific sections that we're going to touch on. So that's how the presentation will be divided. And as we go into it, I just want to keep this at the top of your mind, that we have the instructions and the instrument linked for your viewing, so you can use that as a reference. And as you go through, you'll notice that the entire document includes regular text as well as several sections that are listed in italics. So all of the instructions or the instruction language will be in italics, while the rest of the document is in the instrument part is in regular print. So just keep that in mind as we go forward. And so for our first section, I would like to turn it over to Carrie England to talk about evaluation.
Great, thanks, Sandra. My name is Carrie England. I'm the SILC Executive Director in California and the contractor for ILRU. Real briefly, I'm a 49-year-old Caucasian female. I use pronouns she and her. Today, I have short brown hair and glasses and a black and white striped shirt, and I'm in front of a SILC office background. So today, I'm going to talk a little bit about evaluation. And you will see when you look at the actual instrument itself that the language that's included is for section 1.4 evaluation. And it says methods and processes the SILC will use to evaluate the effectiveness of the SPIL, including timelines and evaluation of satisfaction of individuals with disabilities. Wow, that's a mouthful, right? What does that mean? Next slide. So what does that mean? Really, it's talking about how are we going to evaluate the effectiveness of the outcomes that we've included. We're going to do that by describing the methods that will be used, the timelines that you're going to use to evaluate the effectiveness and in meeting your objectives. Next, you'll be evaluating consumer satisfaction. And for that one, you will be describing the way that the silk is going to be evaluating the satisfaction of individuals with blah. Today, I am not speaking correctly. I'm sorry. Let me start that sentence over. The evaluation of consumer satisfaction must include how is the silk going to evaluate that satisfaction. Specifically, how are individuals with significant disabilities going to be able to provide input into independent living services or SIL services that are being provided. So that all needs to be outlined in your state plan as well. Finally, you will have how are you going to evaluate progress on your objectives? The evaluation that's included in your state plan really should be outcomes focused, and they should be able to measure progress towards achieving your objectives, your goal, and your mission. So your measurable objectives, indicators, target performance levels, and target dates all will help to facilitate the development and implementation of your evaluation plan. Okay. So we have a lot more training on how to do this at the ILRU website. And there is a training on the 3-pronged approach, which you might want to look at. The link to the training PowerPoint is in the PowerPoint for today's materials, and you can also find that on the ILRU website. Okay, so the instructions for the evaluation plan, the silk should be describing how they're going to measure that consumer satisfaction. This is separate from how are the centers going to measure satisfaction with the services that they are providing. This can be done in collaboration with the centers, and many states will obtain the consumer satisfaction surveys done by each center. But the silk is also responsible to do a survey of all of the people in the state to see how are things panning out? Are people satisfied with IL services? You should also incorporate information from the center's most recently available program performance reports. Those are supposed to be sent by the centers to each silk each year. I know sometimes that slips our minds. Most of the time, the program performance reports can be found on the ACL webpage, but I know that sometimes they're a little bit behind. So it's best if you establish a process to get those from each of the centers once they're approved by ACL. The evaluation plan should also include a method to gather input from stakeholders and the public. So how are you going to do that? Is it going to be surveys? Is it going to be public meetings? Are you going to have telephone calls? All of that should be outlined there. You should also be identifying how progress is going to be measured and the timelines by which progress will be measured. So that way your SPIL ends up being kind of a roadmap that you can follow as you're headed towards obtaining your goals. Okay. I really, really want to highlight this part of it. The SPIL evaluation is not a Center for Independent Living evaluation. The SILC is not supposed to be evaluating center performance, services, or compliance. That is the responsibility of ACL. ACL compliance is compliance by the centers receiving Part C funds under Section 722 is the responsibility of ACL and OILP. And under Section 723, the responsibility for that compliance is the DSE. But it is not the SILC, and it is not the goal of the SPIL evaluation plan. The Part B compliance responsibility is that of the DSE. With respect to how the Part B funding is being managed. The process for that oversight has to be negotiated and is included in your SPIL in Section 4.5. So it gives you that guidance that you need to make sure that you're spending those 7B dollars appropriately. Okay. Then next slide, please. Once you've included all of that information into your SPIL, it's the Silk's responsibility to be identifying any issues that would indicate the need to adjust the plan in response to the evaluation results. So is the evaluation a one and done kind of a thing? No, it's not. It should be an ongoing process, and the Silk needs to be flexible enough to know when that plan might need to be changed. So they recommend that we consult as Silks with the different centers regarding whether a SPIL amendment should be developed, depending on those evaluation results. So like I said, maybe you do an evaluation 1 year into your state plan and you realize that you're not reaching the targeted number of people that you thought you would be. And so you might need to adjust your goals or your outcome measurements, or perhaps the activities, to make sure that you can meet that plan or to be more reasonable. So again, you need to coordinate that work with the Centers for Independent Living, because the state plan is a joint project between the centers and the Silk, and is signed off on by the DSC, but it is a collaborative effort. Okay, I think that concludes my part, Sandra. I'm going to send it back over to you.
All righty. Thanks so much. So our next section is on the financial plan. That's section 1.5. And in the instrument, it says that the financial plan should be the sources, uses of, and efforts to coordinate funding to be used to accomplish the SPIL goals and objectives. And this also should include the process for grants and contracts, the selection of grantees, and distribution of funds to facilitate effective operations and provisions of services. So that's the instrument language that you're responding to. And then the instructions go on to say that in this section, we are to describe the financial plan for the use of federal and non-federal funds that are going to be used to meet the objectives identified in your SPIL. So the financial plan is a summary of the anticipated sources, the amounts, and proposed use of funds in a table to support the SPIL objectives, but it's not a detailed budget. So we're going to go to the next slide and see a little bit more about what this looks like. So in the actual SPIL document, this looks a little bit differently, but in order for us to get this into the PowerPoint and for it to be accessible by screen readers, I recreated the table for you, but it includes the same information. So this table has headers across the top that includes the Silk resource plan, IL services, general SPIL operations, other SPIL activities, and then retained by the DSE for admin. And then as we go down this chart, the rows are labeled as Title VII funds, one for Part B and one for Part C, and then other federal funds, I&E funds, and Social Security reimbursement, and then a column or a row for other. And so this will be filled out, and I'm actually going to go ahead and go to the next slide because this is a continuation of the financial plan. The rest of the rows include non-federal funds, the Part B state match, which there's some instructions later on in this document that details how that should be calculated. Other state match for funds in the SPIL, state funds, and other. So this, it is always interesting to kind of look at this financial plan to see what's in your current SPIL and kind of bump that up against what you know to be what's happening in reality in your state or what's been appropriated. And then you can see kind of where you might need to make adjustments for future years as well. Make sure everything is being accounted for. Now, there are several notes in this document with regards to additional information about the sources of funds and what type of information you should include in your financial plan. So the document makes a note that other federal funds include but are not limited to Title I funds under the Act, so other Rehab Act funds, Social Security payments, funding from Housing and Urban Development, HUD, and funding received from other federal programs, such as the Work Incentives Planning and Assistance Program, which is the WIPA program. So any other type of federal fund that you funds that you might receive that correspond to either your general operations of a center or the services that are being provided by the center, or that correspond directly to a SPIL objective or part of the plan, need to be listed there. So if you have U.S. Department of Transportation dollars that correspond directly to a SPIL objective regarding accessible transportation, this would be an example of where you would need to include it. Now, for non-federal funds, that should include, and again, but are not limited to, your state and local government funds, as well as non-government funds from individual donors, foundations, corporations, and community organizations. So sometimes you will receive a special grant or a special allocation from a non-government source to do specific work with a center or on a SPIL objective. This is again where it would be listed. And then the state government funds will include matching funds in compliance with the Rehab Act. It'll also include general revenue funds and funds made available through other state programs, such as Medicaid reimbursements and aging and developmental disabilities councils. So pretty much everything should be included if it corresponds with SPIL operations or a SPIL objective. Now, there's some important notes that are listed in this document that I'm going to go over really quickly. And that is, as you're listing the amount for your Silk resource plan, it specifies that there is a restriction on the amount. If more than 30% of the Part B appropriation is to be used for the Silk resource plan, then your justification of why it exceeds the 30% threshold will actually be included in section 5.2, which is this the Silk section, and it won't be included in this financial narrative. And then for the DSC, for the column where it references the DSC amounts for administrative costs, there is a cap of 5%. The DSC may not retain more than 5% of the Part B appropriation for admin costs. And then there's an example that it's provided in order to do that calculation. And there's some additional examples with calculations when we're talking about match. So again, as we go into this section, there's a couple of notes that continue, including a note stating that as you're looking and evaluating your state plan and what's happening in your state, deviations of less than 25% of the financial plan would be reported as a technical amendment, and those that exceed 25% of the original projected financial plan would be considered a substantial amendment. And later on, ACL gives some instructions on what to do for both of those situations. Again, there's notes about state matching requirements for Part B funds, basically reiterating that states are required to provide either in cash or in kind at least 10% of the total project cost per year as match. And there are instructions on how to calculate this as well. So after this chart, there will be a space for a financial plan narrative. This is where you're going to describe the financial plan for the use of the funds and how they'll be used to meet the objectives identified in the SPIL. So the financial plan, again, is the summary of those anticipated sources, the amounts, and the proposed use of funds to support the SPIL objectives, not a detailed budget. And just as a separate side note from us is that in the past, ACL has looked for specific information in this section regarding the description of the use of Part B funds. For example, if in your table you indicated Part B funds are to be spent on SIL operations or other IL services, in this financial plan narrative, it would be good to list the names of those SILs and the amounts each organization has been allocated. So as just a reminder, the DSE must follow what's in the SPIL, and the SPIL author should be providing enough information in these sections to ensure the DSE can carry out their responsibilities. And it'll be also easier for you if you're doing the SILC evaluation of the plan to go back and look to see if funding is being spent according to the plan. So for this next section, I'm gonna put it over to Jeremy Morris, and he is gonna go over section 2.
Hey everyone, Jeremy Morris. I am a mid-30s white male, short brown hair, and a bookshelf with everything behind me. So section 2, this is a section of the plan that I really like a lot of things that you can do with this. So it's scope, extent, and arrangement of services. So section 2.1, the instrument language itself says services to be provided to persons with significant disabilities that promote full access to the community life, including geographic scope, determination of eligibility, and statewide reach. So the instructions for this are to check the appropriate boxes in the table indicating the types of IL services to be provided to meet the objectives identified in section 1.3 of the SPIL, and whether the services will be provided by the SILs or by the DSE, either directly or with contracts and other grants to other entities. To support the operation of Part B and Part C funded SILs through Part B funding, SILs must be in compliance with the standards and assurances in subsections B and C of section 725, or provide core services of a Center for Independent Living as identified in section 1329.4. Part B funds may also be utilized for other IL services, research, and projects. You can include a map as part of this, but it would be an attachment and not part of the inside of this section. There we go. It is working. Okay, so when I said you have to check the appropriate boxes, there's a table in the state plan that the first column is all of the independent living services that are within the act that can be provided by centers. The next column is provided using Part B funding. The next column is provided using other funds. And then the third column is the entity that provides the services. So you specify whether it is the SIL, the DSE, or another entity. And each row is a different service. So you see it starts off with the core services, and that's what we have shown on the chart. So you mark what core services are going to be provided with Part B funding, with other funding, and then who is providing those. Section 2.2 is outreach to unserved and underserved populations. So the instrument language has how services will be made available to populations that are unserved and underserved by Part B and Part C to address equity, including minority groups and urban and rural populations, and how outreach will be conducted. So part of this is your statewide outreach plan, and you're required to address each of the following topics. So your definitions of unserved and underserved for outreach, how unserved and underserved is determined within your state, the minority groups that will be impacted, the urban and rural populations, any targeted populations and geographic areas within your state, and the outreach activities and methods to be conducted and who will be conducting them. And the actual, the language continues. So for the instructions, identify the steps to be taken regarding statewide outreach to populations that are unserved and underserved by programs that are funded under Title VII, including minority groups and urban and rural populations, and how outreach will be conducted to address equity. Now, this is a section that, again, I think that there's a lot of importance in what you can do with this. And also remember, this isn't replacing the SIL's own outreach plans and their own responsibilities for outreach. It can be coordinated with those plans, so you can come up with activities that are going to be done together. But this isn't a replacement, and this isn't something where you just take, the center's outreach plans and put it right into here. So there are some definitions as part of this. Equity is defined in Executive Order 13985, and it says the consistent and systematic, fair, just, and impartial treatment of all individuals, including individuals who belong to underserved communities that have been denied such treatment, such as Black, Latino, and Indigenous and Native American persons, Asian American and Pacific Islanders and other persons of color, members of religious minorities, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer or LGBTQ plus persons, persons with disabilities, persons who live in rural areas, and persons otherwise adversely affected by persistent poverty or inequity. And unserved and underserved groups or populations is also defined as populations such as individuals from racial and ethnic minority backgrounds, disadvantaged individuals, individuals with limited English proficiency, and individuals from underserved geographic regions. The third part of Section 2 is the coordination section. So the instrument language says plans for coordination of services and cooperation between programs and organizations that support community life for persons with disabilities. The instructions give you, of course, the more detail. Describe the plans for coordination and cooperation between the SILC, SILs, and DSE, and with other entities, programs, and organizations. Include specific methods and efforts for each entity that is included. Didn't mean to go forward that far. This is a section that I think I know our state in the past had more or less done, you know, we looked at it and said it's the same thing we're doing every other time. We've gotten more into a process where we want to really put a lot better thought in here of what are some of the other programs and entities and organizations that we're currently not working with, or we may not have a great relationship with. So we're setting ourselves that, you know, we're going to prioritize that over the next 3 years. And it also helps to show that we want to make that commitment to those other organizations so that we're not just, you know, saying that we're going to do it. We actually have something that we're going to report on from it. So if you have further ongoing technical assistance, as everyone on this call probably knows, you can contact Paula McAwee, and here's her information.
We'll make sure that that gets in the chat too. So if folks need that, you can. We also have some resources linked in the PowerPoint, and I'll drop in the chat where you can find a recording of this call as well as the PowerPoint for today.